Support for this program comes from Jazz on the Tube, the internet's largest collection of free streamable classic jazz videos. From Miles Davis to Louis Armstrong, from Thelonious Monk to Duke Ellington, you'll find it all on jazzonthetube.com. Start your free subscription today.
Hi, and welcome to Jazz Talk, a Jazz on the Tube podcast. My name is Ken McCarthy, and this is where we talk with people who are doing important work that supports and illuminates the music we love. The writers, the scholars, the educators, the filmmakers, the producers, and more.
Hi, everybody. Today we're talking with Peter McGuire about his very useful and valuable resource called Jazz Clubs Worldwide. Peter, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to touch base, as it were. Yeah.
So for people that don't yet know about Jazz Clubs Worldwide, what is it? I'll just say this, that we use it all the time. It's anytime I travel, I dip in and see if there's any scenes going on or clubs or places to check out. A couple of years ago, I was in Istanbul and I ended up in an amazing jazz club thanks to your database. So tell us, what is Jazz Clubs Worldwide?
Well, in fact, as I say, the whole business of the internet was a perfect accident. I was working on the European Times, actually monitoring European Union financial services legislation. And the problem was that there was a lag between when information went out, because you do like sort of for instance, stocks and shares and a different sector. So there'd be new information could come on available, but it wouldn't be published, you see, physically for perhaps a month. And then the internet was there, and I thought, yeah, maybe, I have that kind of mind. We could do it immediately, couldn't we? And of course, there were very few people who actually could make websites at this time.
So this would have been the early mid-90s?
1996.
Yeah.
So I actually went out and I got a book and I taught myself HTML. And very rapidly, because there were very few people around, I found myself being a web developer. For, major organizations, WWF, European Commission, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
And I used to travel quite a lot in Europe, and it was an obvious thing to do. For much as my own information as other people, I make a list of jazz clubs worldwide, or certainly the ones I knew, and then people from elsewhere. And that's the way it was launched. In fact, the first club that I got information from, quite improbably, was the Hot Club of Lisbon. Which in fact is actually the oldest jazz club in Europe, apparently. And then I got a massive database from Denmark. They're very well organized there. So it took off very rapidly. It's had many kind of updates and changes. And so it went. And this, it took on a life of its own. It was never money making, really. And of course, it was quite difficult to make money on websites in those days.
Yeah. You couldn't even if somebody wanted to pay you, it took years before there was a safe payment.
Well, in fact, at one point, we actually had a payment system because I was involved in other kinds of things. We were paying £150 a month just for the basic cost of using the service. It was really quite expensive. So when it became available, I actually put on Google Ads, and that produced a modest kind of income, which in fact covered the hosting. But it was never to be monetized. And I quite enjoy researching, and, it's fascinating. And frankly, I was very busy with other projects as well. And all went well, really, until 2015. It was in the top million sites on the internet. It was
Wow. That, and
800,000.
that and that may not sound impressive to people not who don't know the numbers, but there are billions of
Well,
websites.
yeah,
So to
okay.
be in the
And
top
then,
million puts you way in the top 1% or
exactly. And then,
less.
of course, which you might have had a bit of experience with this, in the March of that year, suddenly Google trashed my rankings.
They did the same to us. They
And the
almost
next
wiped us
thing I
out.
know
Yeah.
is they're doing it themselves, aren't they?
Yeah.
Top of the page in a 20 clubs, very badly curated. And of course, it was very depressing because I knew there's no way I'm going to be able to fight Google. I did actually send because I have some contacts. I did send actually a letter to the European Commission section about this, but they will look at big things, but this, and it nevertheless anyway.
Well,
So I
just as a sidebar, yeah, I mean, Google has wiped out so many small businesses. They basically see who's doing something successful online and then copy it and make that the number one ranking and then push yours down. It's the biggest criminal enterprise on the planet. But
Oh
we won't.
yeah, I mean, they obviously stole it. I mean, there's no top of the page for country and western or top of the page for rock and roll. They had a ready-made database there, really.
Yeah.
So I was pretty depressed, and I thought, I'm going to take it down. But I had a lot of international contacts. I mean, including quite, I mean, Bob Brookmeyer was a fan, for instance. Uh, and then I thought, well, I've got a huge amount of information here. So I took myself off in 2016, 17, I think it was, to Jazz Ahead. And basically, I got a load of information, and I was really quite heartened because a lot of people knew me there because of the site. I mean, one guy in South America told me that his business model had been built on my research, basically. Uh, and so I made it into a two-tier thing, basically. So an open directory with basic information for public, and the other one, spreadsheets on Excel spreadsheets, which in fact had full information with, contact numbers, email, clickable URLs, etc., etc. And people seem to like it. It's never been massive, but I mean, it ultimately ended up with 17 separate sheets, in fact. I mean, just to give you an indication, I mean, the European sheet alone probably had best part of 1,000 entries on it. So it was a
So
great time saver, really, for people.
so is
Uh,
do you still have that two-tier approach?
well, yes, indeed, but I've added to that. In fact, now I have where you can actually pay on a monthly basis and you can access 28 spreadsheets online, plus a database, searchable database, which covers clubs, festivals, and societies. Uh, and that's the first option. The second option is actually the spreadsheets, which is now actually 17 spreadsheets. Yeah, it was 15 before, 17, which actually get sent to you, updates, etc., etc. And they also, of course, have access to the online 28 sheets and the database. And it works pretty well. I say, it's I wouldn't say it's ginormous, but it was a way of saving the information, and kind of at least I didn't shut the site down. It just seemed criminal to have all this information. But really, you can't fight Google, and you yourself will know that top of the page you've got such people as TripAdvisor and et al., who in fact basically are scraping organizations, who, they put stuff up there. You look on there, they may be the odd jazz club on their listing, but you really have to search around. But, they spend a great deal of money. They're always top of the page. People like graphics and clickables. And so, I'm on page one now, in a very good position, but, you really can't compete. And particularly with Google at the very top. So the traffic really is nowhere near. I'm way away from being in the top million. So they trashed the site basically in terms of yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There's not
So the public site would be good for, let's say, somebody that knows they're going to go visit a different city or a different country.
Well, indeed, yeah. I mean, like if you went to Istanbul, for instance, as you yourself you did, you would find any clubs, you would find the address, you would find the telephone number, and you would find the web link. So it's basic but useful.
Very useful. How I don't know how I would have found that club otherwise.
Well, indeed. So that's what I provide, and the professional version, which is spreadsheets, of course, is aimed at people who really need to make contact with clubs in terms of looking for gigs.
So that would be great for agents or for musicians
Yeah,
themselves.
and indeed, yeah. Festivals are quite difficult actually because there's not really a decision-making person that you can generally talk to, but the information is there and they're classified by month. So for instance, if you want to know what festivals are appearing in, I don't know, June, you can see exactly, which is also useful because if somebody's traveling, wants an American band and they're going to be in the autumn, there's no point in looking at festivals in May. So I try to make it as kind of logically usable as possible.
So in addition to the club listing, you also have the festival listing.
Yeah, oh yeah, the festival listing is quite big. Yeah, I mean, and that's classified by, basically the whole site is classified by continent and then by country and then by cities. And that's the way it's classified.
And
So
then you also mentioned that you list societies. Tell us about that. This is an area of jazz that I don't think everybody's aware of, how many
well,
great
no,
local jazz societies there are.
it used to be historically quite a model. I mean, in the UK, there were kind of jazz societies. Now it tends to be confined to the USA, where there's quite a lot, in fact, and Australia has quite a lot of jazz societies.
Okay.
I don't think it's too common elsewhere, to be frank with you. But certainly America, there's quite a substantial number, actually. You'd be surprised.
I know there's a great one down in, I think, Sarasota, Florida is one that sticks out to me as being very ambitious and produces a lot of programming.
Well,
Um,
yes, some might be based upon, the Clifford Brown Society or something like that. But some of them more generalist. But they tend to be a bit focused. You'll have like traditional jazz society, that kind of interest, as it were, mutual interest kind of societies. But yeah, it's surprising. I can't remember off the top of my head. There's certainly a couple of hundred.
Amazing.
Yeah, historically, of course, there were many jazz societies. On a European level, uh, there's still quite a few of what have kind of morphed into something else, in fact.
Hmm.
Netherlands, for instance, quite a lot of the clubs there and organizations tend to be what would be similar. I don't really know in American terms. In England, they'd be like limited companies or non-profit making
Hmm. Hmm.
organizations. There's a special category there, and they're quite organized there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Also in Germany, similar kind of thing. Uh,
it-
but
we
you know
play a lot of different videos on Jazz on the Tube, and I always say thank God for Europe because a good percentage of our best footage of the great musicians, from Louis Armstrong to
oh
Miles
yeah,
Davis, it's
incredible.
a lot of it was filmed in some of the best stuff was done in Europe.
Well, yeah. I mean, the other day I found a one of with Thelonious Monk and Kai Winding, and I'm just trying to remember who else was on it. Sonny Stitt, which was
Ooh,
1961. I mean, a full concert.
wow.
Uh, and yeah, I find, people who Hank Mobley, for instance, of which there's very little. And there's a couple of things on YouTube. One which is very poor. The other one is really not very good quality. Must have been taken off a television set. But I mean, there's really very little, and I keep finding these. But then you've got, for instance, a BBC Jazz 625, which was an amazing program. The people they had on there, full concepts of Dizzy and all, J.J. Johnson and all kinds of people. But that kind of that area of broadcasting doesn't exist anymore.
That's the frightening thing. When I first started Jazz on the Tube, which I think we started in right as soon as the video embed code emerged, I was like, I couldn't believe my eyes. I said, "You mean all we have to do is copy and paste that little bit of code, and we'll be able to stream a video?" And I instantly started Jazz on the Tube as soon as I saw it. Um, where was I going there? Oh yeah, I thought eventually I'd run out of material. That we'd empty every closet and everybody's archives would be. But we keep finding new stuff almost
Oh, yeah.
almost daily.
Well, I mean, for instance, I found a jazz club in Ulaanbaatar,
Oh, you're kidding.
Mongolia. There's actually, believe it or not, there's a subtitled video on YouTube, A Brief History of Jazz in Mongolia.
Incredible.
I mean, it's called the Fat Cat Club. In fact, one of the young women who emerged, there's even a jazz college there.
In Mongolia?
Yeah, she's actually a face on the European scene now.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, she does the voice singing too.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, really quite, I mean, we're not talking amateur night, they're really, it seemed to have emerged from the circus circuit there, but
Interesting.
yeah, but a brief history of jazz in Mongolia. I always had an ambition that one day I would actually find a club in the Gobi Desert, but that's about the nearest I've got.
Or the Sahara. Interest on a sidebar of the circus connection. Uh, it circus is probably in Europe too,
Yeah.
but before movies and all the other entertainment, live circuses were it. I mean, that was
Well, yeah, of
the
course, yeah.
yeah.
But the Mongolian ones, you should check it out. It's rather interesting. The only problem is, of course, unless you'll be familiar with it, of course, you need to download the actual subtitle file
Oh,
too.
so you know what they're
Otherwise,
saying.
unless you speak Mongolian, it's not.
And
uh,
Eddie Durham, who is not as well known as he should have been, he taught Charlie Kristen how to play electric guitar. He did some of the original arrangements that made Lester Young employable because his register was unusual, and he was getting a lot of flack in his early career. And Eddie Durham wrote arrangements that integrated Lester Young into the music industry. Um, he was the music director for the great Count Basie band when it first hit New York. He did the arrangement for In the Mood. He really should get a lot more credit. But anyway, his training was in the circus and rodeo shows.
well, yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary, really. But I made a lot of contacts internationally. I mean, some quite high level. I mean, people like Bob Brookmeyer. And recently, I'm not going to mention because it's data protection, but recently I've had contacts with really some, really quite high level players, which to an extent depresses me slightly. I'm actually on one level think, yeah, very flattering, but on another level, I think, why do these people need me, on this level? Surely they have a booking agent who takes care of everything. And
Yeah.
I find that a little disturbing. I mean, it might sound as if I'm not looking after my own interests, but I mean, it's always been, I've been playing jazz since I was 17, so I'm immersed in it. I do play at least 2 or 3 times a week, I
Oh,
mean,
really?
yeah, I mean, last week I played till what, 2 o'clock in the morning, and the following night, past 2 o'clock in the morning. In fact, one of the waitresses who I recognized as being the daughter of a flute player I know who'd grown up a little bit, was working there in a perfect Art Deco bar. And this is 1 o'clock. She phoned her father, and would you believe he turned up with his wife with his flute?
Wow. And it sounds like you're based in the UK?
No, no,
Oh,
I'm in Brussels.
oh, sorry, sorry.
Yeah, no,
Um,
no.
so you're,
Yeah,
oh, that's interesting. So you're in Belgium.
yeah, I'm in Belgium, yes.
Wow. And so I mean, you have to, I'm in the United States, been to Europe, but not very often. I know there's a big jazz scene there, but even when I hear that there's a jazz scene in Belgium, I'm surprised.
Well, I mean, when I arrived here, there were probably more than 20 venues.
In,
I mean,
in, in,
you
in
have things like Toots, of course, who's very famous, Toots Thielemans,
mhm.
uh, and Sadie and Jack Peltzer, and there's some quite well-known names. But it's always been. I mean, there was actually a very. They had a really innovatory New Orleans band, Dixieland, in the early 1930s here.
In Belgium.
Yeah, and after the war, of course, along the Belgium coast at Blankenberg and places like that, there were huge big bands. Jack Sells, who was a famous player. I mean, I just about caught the back end of these guys who were really quite old by the time I got to meet them. Really, we're talking about top players. I mean, really, really good players. I mean, Johnny Douvre, the baritone sax player. I mean, he played with the Francie Bolan band. I mean, some extreme. I mean, Brussels, believe it or not, just Brussels itself has two jazz schools,
Jazz
uh,
schools.
one French and one Flemish, because of the language, you see.
Right, right.
And Leuven, which is probably no more than, what, 30 minutes or less, right? That has its own jazz school. You've got a jazz school in Ghent. You've got one in Antwerp. You have one in Liège. Uh, there's a minor one in Tournai. I mean, I play a lot with kids from the conservatoires here. I mean, and we're talking about people, there's quite a substantial contingent of Asian musicians from Japan and China. Also, in last couple of years, some great musicians from the Ukraine. I mean, really, really good play. Eastern European, they're always well trained, classically. Uh, very, very good players. So it's very, very diverse. I mean, in Brussels, you really never know where people come from because it's a very cosmopolitan town, and
Sure.
it might not be their first language, but most people speak English. I mean, there was a young woman appeared at the jam session, tall blonde woman, and I have quite an eye for clothes because I lived with two very fashionable women for a long time, uh, and I thought, yeah, American for sure with the grooming and the clothes and tall blonde, played the piano quite well actually, in perfect English. I mean, she turned out to be a civil engineer and architect from Istanbul, would you believe?
Incredible.
Yeah, it's a very diverse community here. Uh, the jazz scene, in fact, has taken a turn for the better. We now have a club called Toots, and which is really a very good hang indeed. Music Village just nearby. Uh, the sounds up above the town. Toots in particular is featuring really quite big names. Uh, Brussels Jazz Club, which was around when I first arrived, was a major club on the Grand Place. I mean, they had people like Maynard Ferguson on there, and
Wow.
Chet Baker used to play there regularly with Philip Catherine. But I used to play there once a month at least with a band I played with at the time. But that disappeared. But this is a general pattern. I mean, Manchester in the 70s had 15 clubs within walking distance.
Really? Jazz clubs?
Yeah. Now there is probably not one club doing what you call a dedicated jazz club. No.
Well, I know Manchester is one of the great music scenes of the planet. I actually made a pilgrimage there, and of course, they were responsible for launching the rave culture. They didn't invent it. It was invented in Chicago and Detroit, but they broadcast it to the world. And when I was in Manchester, have you ever been to Manchester?
Manchester, England.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was born there.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's we were out on a Friday night, just a normal Friday night, nothing special, and the streets were as crowded almost as Mardi Gras. I've never
Oh
seen
yeah,
so many
well,
people.
yeah, you have 40,000 students there currently.
Okay. I've
Uh,
never seen so many people out and about
it's
and
a
having
madhouse.
a raucous good time.
It's a madhouse,
And
absolute mad.
apparently the whole culture, because if you think of the world history, the scope of world history, young people didn't have money to go out to nightclubs until the factories appeared and they were getting paid wages.
Of course, but I
So
mean, the bars there. I mean, there's a big nightclub culture. Well, it's more actually it's been nightclubs, discos, pubs, of course.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it
yeah,
was
I mean, it's a madhouse on a Saturday night in Manchester, complete madhouse. But Jack,
every Saturday. It doesn't have to be a
all the
special
time, yeah,
occasion.
the student population is immense. There used to be various colleges which amalgamated over I mean the campus is incredible. It stretches a couple of miles. I mean it's really quite unbelievable. But it was a great jazz scene there one, and there's still quite a lot of jazz actually in England. The only problem is demographics, which I think perhaps is a bit the same as the in America, that you tend to see uh, 50s and over. Uh, if I look at a video of American performance, all I can see is kind of people who are losing their hair. So I assume that and this is the problem too in the UK, that the demographics tend to be older people. This is entirely different in Europe, completely different. If I play at the Music Village, for instance, a very high percentage of the audience will be young people, not only people, but young women.
Really, just like
We're
the old
talking
days.
ones, twos, half a dozen. Yeah, I mean, certainly. And, I know Europe pretty well. For instance, I know Croatia very well. Uh, and if you go to a club there, it's general. It's general. And also, England still tends to have a bit of a touch of the kind of trad wars.
Oh,
Uh,
still.
oh yes, it goes on. Older people, still wanting to respect the canon, as it were. I mean, I had one guy sent me an email and suggested I should segregate the modern clubs from the traditional jazz clubs, uh, which is absurd. But this doesn't tend to happen in Europe. I mean, in a music village, you can have one night almost free jazz, and you can have a New Orleans band the following night. People are not so, prejudiced, as it were. But certainly, the European audiences are significantly younger, much younger than you find in the UK.
I found a video, and I watched so many videos, I don't know that I'll ever be able to find it again. And it was young people in Lebanon, contemporary in Beirut, talking about, they were outside a club. They were interviewed people coming in and out of the club, why they love jazz. And you have never heard such rhapsodic descriptions of jazz, the jazz idiom in your life, from coming from these young, and a lot of young women, just loving the music. Um, hey, I want to go back to something about jazz education. Now, I remember in was it, yeah, the early 80s, very early 80s, I ran into a music, he was like a grad student where I went to school. He's a very good piano player named Peter Martin, different than the one people think of. It's a different Peter Martin, great player. And I asked him, what are you doing, Peter? He goes, I'm teaching jazz at the new school. This is like 1982 or 83. And I was stunned because, as you know, the idea of jazz education at the university was not a thing. I mean, now it's everywhere.
Oh, no, exactly. I mean, in fact, Trinity College in London, in fact, if you were a guitar player, you weren't even allowed to take it in through the door. It was forbidden. The first jazz club, first jazz course, uh, dedicated jazz course in the UK was actually came into existence around 1960
Okay.
in Leeds.
In Leeds of all
Uh,
places. Okay.
And now you have, certainly in London, Trinity College, Royal College of Music. Um, there's a dedicated one. Leeds still goes on. There's one up in Newcastle. I have a friend, Sebastian de Crum, the drummer, who's at Berkeley, who teaches at Leeds and also the Purcell, which is a very rarefied school for young people. Classical, but there's a very strong jazz thing there. Uh, I have kind of mixed feelings about it. You know, Dave Liebman said about jazz education, it's a double-edged sword. And I don't know whether people really realize. I know Barry Harris was rather kind of the bane of jazz schools.
Outspoken, yeah.
But what I notice, and is slightly depressing, there's never been so many high-level, technically high-level players in the world, particularly saxophone players. But the problem is, because they're all doing a uniform curriculum, they all sound alike. And the concept, their own voice, and it tends to be playing for one's peers. It's become a kind of exercise in virtuosity. Well, you know, for me, jazz, it's an emotional music. There's storytelling. You know, I don't have to be told who Stan Getz. He's only supposed to play one note. I know it is.
Right.
And the only exception to this rule, and probably because he's totally independent, is the pedagogical genius in Barcelona, Joan Chamorro, who has produced, I mean, unbelievable, particularly young women. I mean, Andrea Motis, Rita Pays, I mean, phenomenal young musicians, which he takes from about 7 years old. In fact, he's just been awarded a medal, hasn't he, by at the Lincoln Center for services to jazz for 20 years. Joan Chamorro.
Extraordinary. And that's Barcelona.
St Andrew Jazz Band.
Oh, right. Exactly.
It's an independent. Yeah, so I presumably he can do what he wants, but his kids, they know the history, and they can play New Orleans and they can play Tom Harrell.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention the school, but there's a school somewhere around me that has a jazz degree, and there were some kids doing demonstrations, and they didn't know who Ella Fitzgerald was, and they were studying jazz singing.
It's the same thing with the students here. And again, it's the fault of a lot of the people who teach there. I know many of them who are not really very interested in the history. Nothing happened after Coltrane, basically, before Coltrane. But Joan Chamorro's kids, they really know the corpus. They really do. And he's produced some and continues to produce some outstanding musicians. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. But, you know, it's the nature of higher education, you know. You're part of an institute, you have to set standards, you have to have a curriculum, and you have other people perhaps who are overseeing you, perhaps from a totally different discipline. You know, I mean, I worked in a university for 3 years, so I know exactly what the form is. And it's inevitable. It's inevitable. I'm sure Berkeley is probably a little different, but I don't think it's really very healthy, this kind of producing virtuoso musicians worldwide who all sound the same because they're all following the same curriculum. Quite what the answer to that is, I don't know, to be honest with you. But
I think a start would be introducing the young musicians to the whole history of the music.
But they're not. And I mean, I remember saying to one of the lecturers, who I knew quite well, a bass player, about Shorty Rogers. And he said, oh, was he small? Which was a joke for him. But for me, I thought, this guy's a bozo. I mean, he doesn't know who Shorty Rogers is, and he's teaching it as a jazz school.
Yeah, I mean, the best players are playing, you know, and sometimes they teach, but generally.
Well, yeah, but this is also another problem too, of course, that, you know, it's very difficult to make a living playing jazz. And most of the people I know who play at a high level tend to be teach to, and that pays the rent, as it were, which is fine in a way, and, you know, touring all the time, and which is part and parcel of being a high level musician, doesn't suit everybody. And they get into a comfort zone, basically.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
the touring, you know, it's very glamorous to be on the road the first couple of years, and
well,
then it's
I
a
mean,
got to be
yeah.
the grind of all grinds. You know, tonight the
Sebastian was
city.
on the road for 8 years with Jamie Cullum.
Who was?
My friend Sebastian was like the drummer
Oh,
with Jamie Cullum for 8 years. And I mean, they were getting ill in the end and sick
oh yeah.
and I mean, really unbelievable. And what is even worse, of course, people think you don't exist. So they've got a gig and they never think of calling you because they think there's no point because you're not going to be there.
Yeah.
uh,
Hey, speaking of
it took
education, now your education, it sounds like you said started at 17. Was it in Manchester?
myself, sorry.
Your jazz education. You're playing, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the North is actually the seat of brass bands. So at one time, all the best brass players, we're talking about up into the symphony orchestras, and everything, they all came from the North because
And
of the
and
brass band
and
tradition.
for people that don't know, the UK is England is divided conceptually into the South and the North, and
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, well,
The North is the gritty, industrial, real people part of the country, and the South is the
they were,
Oxford graduates.
well, but the technical level of the best brass band players is unbelievable. I mean, wow,
Well,
extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
you always have to look at the Beatles. I mean, they were Northern to the bone.
Well, exactly. Uh, but yeah, basically, when I went to my secondary school at 11, somebody just thrust a tenor horn into my hand. I think it's called an English horn. I'm not sure in America. It's the B flat, A flat instrument.
Oh,
It's one step below the baritone.
is it a single reed or is it it's brass?
It's brass,
Oh, it's
yeah.
brass.
It
Oh,
looks
okay.
like a bit like a. It's between. You've got tenor horn, baritone, euphonium. Uh,
Okay.
So that's it's still widely used it's an E flat instrument essentially.
Yeah.
But I started there and I went into the military when I was 16 years and 3 years, 3 days old.
Really? They take
Yeah.
them that young?
Well, I went into a kind of hyper training course
Oh,
for
okay.
radar technicians, but there was a kind of a music scene there. And I don't quite know why. It was when I was on my first posting. I was posted to RAF Tangmere, #1 Squadron, and there was quite a good jazz scene locally. And I bought a valve trombone, and I was heavily into Dick Trad, which of course was huge in England at that time. And that's where it started. Then I found myself in London after the Air Force and, became a kind of liar about on floors and club habitué and gradually kind of transitioned, not really a word one uses anyway, transformed from being a New Orleans person to mainstream and then modern, as it were. But I still love, I mean, I love Tuba Skinny, for instance.
Oh, they're wonderful, aren't they?
Great band. I mean, terrific. I still love all that. But at the same time, I love all the kind of I love Tom Harrell, and Coltrane and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not so quite comfortable with a lot of the more outre experiments in free jazz. Not at all. You're never quite sure who's kidding who, frankly.
One of my
I know that.
favorite, and trombone is your instrument. So one of my favorite trombone players, and he moved to Europe. I think he might have. I think no, he moved to the Netherlands. Joseph Bowie, who is Lester Bowie's brother,
Yeah.
and he had a
Yeah.
very well polished funk band called Defunct. And I loved. I don't know if you know his. I just love his outrageous raw use of the trombone. I
Some
mean,
great,
it's
great, great players around, terrific. But I mean, Peter Brotzman, who died about a year ago, I don't know if you're familiar with him. I never could quite take him seriously, but he was taken very seriously by a lot of other people.
and then there's
Uh,
George Lewis. Does that ring a bell? I'm trying to think of
but yeah, the clarinet player, I mean, yeah.
I'm thinking there was another fellow.
The later one, yeah.
Yeah, the later one. So your education started when somebody handed you a brass instrument in school.
Yeah, I went upstairs to the bedroom and taught myself because I started piano when I was 4.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
but I mean, my family background is probably, I suppose, a little bit musical. My grandfather was quite a well-known feature on what would be called vaudeville in America, but was called the variety or the halls in England. I mean, around the turn of the 19th century, early 20th century, with a band actually which was called the Gothams,
Okay.
which always rather confused me until I discovered the Gotham was actually the Tin Pan Alley of New York. All the other musicians, the other singers, the singers were all Americans.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
and, and in 1914, they all took off, of course, from Europe and went back to the USA. One was called Fairbanks, amazingly, who was actually, whether he was any relation to the Fairbanks that emerged later, I have no idea.
Oh,
But
so the
but
music they called that, was it music halls? Is that what they called it in
yeah,
England?
the music hall, yeah, yeah. But
And
then,
to refer to the Beatles again, I know that they were deeply, especially Paul McCartney, was so influenced by his
oh, yeah.
father and grandfather's involvement with that music hall tradition. You hear it in so many of their songs.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a head full of them listening to my grandfather when I was brought up by my grandfather, these songs. Um, but I mean, the level of the Gothams, I mean, just to give you an indication, they appeared at Buckingham Palace in Royal Command in 1905. So
Wow.
we took top draw, and then Clarence House for the Queen Mother, and yeah, they were really, in fact, they were called the Royal Gothams from then on.
No.
And his first child, who I never saw, she died before I was born. She was also a lyric soprano. She was also in the business, and my mother was a very good soprano, and uh, uh, various uncles and sisters of my grandfather were singers too. So there was not that he was into jazz or anything of that kind, but there was a smidgen of kind of performing, as it were, in the
Well,
family.
I always say that for there to be a musician of any kind, but especially including jazz musicians, there has to have been a community slash family that person grew up in, because nobody's growing up in a musical desert and becoming a jazz musician.
Not very rarely, anyway, that's for sure. But you've got to remember that jazz, when I was a teenager, was the kind of vehicle for the rebellious.
Ah, okay.
There's a sociological aspect. In fact, there's a book written about it. I could find it written by an academic, which is actually called The Jazz Club,
Okay.
based upon a sociological study of a jazz club in Huddersfield, which is on the other side of the Pennines from Manchester.
Okay.
Uh, and the people, all guys, of course, all young men, uh, they were people with the possibility of upward mobility, but kind of rebellious. And jazz was the music of choice, and this went on probably into the early 60s. And then trad, of course, became very commercialized and became almost pop music. But before then, it was very, very much the music of the kind of the Beat
The beat
Generation,
generation, exactly.
art schools, and all that kind of stuff. So there's actually a sociological aspect to this as well. So, but I mean, it was great music. I mean, it was terrific. I mean, London was fantastic with the traditional jazz clubs, Ken Collier's and Humphrey Littleton and all these people, and then the trad wars with the wars. I mean, there was even a riot, of course, at Bewley, uh, the Bewley Jazz Festival, between the modernists and the traditional jazz people,
Or
with
literal
police
riot.
intervention. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The festival never went on again in 1960. An actual riot.
Like it sounds like a soccer
But yeah,
hooligans.
incredible. Yeah, I mean, really unbelievable. I mean, never the twain shall meet. In fact, Humphrey Littleton, who was a big trad pioneer, actually included in his band at one point a saxophone player called Bruce Turner. And the famous event when he had a concert in Birmingham, somebody in the audience shouted, "Go home, dirty bopper." So, I mean, I did a piece about it recently. I mean, you can be amused by it, but at least people were passionate about the music. So there we are.
You mentioned, I guess the era you're talking about is like the 50s and the early 60s
Oh yeah,
of the
yeah,
rebellion era. And I'm friends with David Amram, and
yeah,
he was, colleague, friend, hanging out with Dave, Jack Kerouac and all those people,
yeah.
and they were they knew they didn't just go hear Charlie Parker. They knew Charlie Parker as a guy within their sphere.
Yeah. And also you've got to remember it was also a music of choice in England, not anymore perhaps, of kind of pretty high level intellectual academics
Mm,
who very often wrote books on jazz and
mm.
jazz criticism on the plumes.
Oh,
So
really?
Osborne, for instance, who was a very, very, very noted social historian, he was very heavily into jazz. Um, Philip Larkin, the poet, was a great man for traditional jazz. So you had this theme as well, but that kind of has disappeared from the universities completely. You know, the university culture is exactly the same as any other culture these days. There's no distinct culture at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little known fact, but Claude Shannon, who is the inventor of information theory, and when he worked at Pac Bell, one of the pioneers of everything we have today, absolute devoted jazz fan, played clarinet, lived in the West Village, went out to the clubs. And I've been trying to reach the family and find out if they kept his records when he passed away. Probably not. But he had a big record collection. He was entirely a jazz man, and happened to be a brilliant. I don't even know what category you put him in. Mathematician, I guess. Yeah, Claude Shannon. Um, so yeah, there's a
There is a
lot of.
social aspect, isn't there, to this as well, too. I mean, in England, probably if you're on a fairly high level, there's no way you're going to say you like jazz, probably. But I remember going on a press trip to Sweden in 2000, uh, the new Swedish economy. And we were talking about very high level people. I mean, really, really high level people. And when they found that I was a jazz musician too, oh wow, if we'd have known, we'd have got, and I played in a big band. You'd never get the CEO of Barclays Bank admitting he played in a big band. I mean, in England, no way, So there's a difference. It's the same in Europe too. I mean, if for instance, and probably not quite as much now, I don't know, but if for instance, if you did a gig in England, say in an aristocratic house, right? You'd be treated like the servant, basically.
Uh,
You'd be going in the back door, and really treated like the hired help. You do a gig here. I mean, I remember doing one in a place at a wedding actually in France, which was set in the middle of, I don't know, 60, 70 acres, of course. The wedding guests were not even allowed to, they were driven in by a minibus. And we were treated with enormous respect. I mean, with
mm.
proper food and wine, and yeah, and the same in Belgium. I played in many kind of large houses here, and there's a kind of equality which you wouldn't find on that level in the UK. I'm not quite sure in America because it's a different kind of aristocracy. Uh, but
If they're
you
if
know,
they're playing for hedge fund managers, I'm sure they'll be treated like the hired help.
well,
But
yeah, yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, England, England in particular, still remains a class-ridden country.
it's
People,
astonishing. Every time I visit, I don't go often, but it's so clear that this is not
people.
America with a British accent. This is another world entirely over there.
Well, I was actually offered a job in Florida in 1989,
Hmm.
uh, which I didn't take up, but it was incredible. I mean, people were absolutely overwhelmed by my accent. I mean, on the plane going back from Florida to New York, there's two ladies with their children, and one of them leaned over and said, "My friend thinks you've got a very sexy voice." So I'd have probably been a hit if I'd have gone to work there, but I thought, no, no, perhaps living in Florida, I'm going to be fairly bored in about 6 weeks. So
They do
I
have a
didn't
good
do it.
scene down there. It depends on which city you're in, but they do have a
Well, this was mid-Florida, near Orlando.
well, I don't know what it was like then, but I have a friend that's in that area now, and he's moved there recently from another part of Florida, and he's a good guitar player, and he was kind of surprised that there is a hidden scene
Yeah, there was a scene there for sure, because
yeah.
there was musicians who retired there. Mousy Alexander, for instance,
Mhm.
he'd retired there. We were playing with him, but it was a combination of things. The guy wanted to employ me. In fact, basically, I knew I wouldn't get on with because I have a very broad view of the world, and he was kind of obsessed, which is, of course, is the way you make money. You
Right,
focus.
exactly.
I've always been way ahead of the curve. I mean, for instance, I did live streaming of a jazz concert in 2000.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have the disc on my desk here.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, Philip Catherine. Yeah.
Hey, well, remind people how they can get information about your site, what the web address is, so they can go
Well,
on.
it's actually it's jazz hyphen clubs hyphen worldwide.com. So I
Gotcha.
don't know. American uses his hyphen, but so it's basically jazz dash, not an underscore, dash jazz dash clubs dash worldwide.com.
And there they can find out about the public
Yeah, on the
version,
homepage.
and then if they have a professional reason, they can
Yeah.
find out about the detailed because that has to be so valuable to somebody in the business who's looking for places to play,
Oh,
looking to
yeah.
fill out, they're already going to be in Europe, and hey, what cities are we going to be in, and we got 3 days off. Can we find a club or two in the vicinity? I mean, that's money. That's really valuable.
I mean, it's even got a map on there. So,
Oh,
if
wow. Okay.
you're looking at Europe, you're not quite sure where Poland is or somewhere, you can look on there and see because people are not, if it's very compressed Europe with countries and people are not always particularly au fait with the realities of geography. So,
Yeah, you might
uh,
not know that Vienna's not that far from Italy, really.
no, well, no,
It,
not at all.
actually,
No.
nothing's far from anything in Europe, in Western Europe.
But Brexit has caused a lot of problems there. Now, yeah, it used to be very easy for a band from here to go to the UK and UK bands to come here. It's become immensely
Oh,
complicated and expensive. So it's very sad, yeah. But within Europe, I mean, Germany, the listing is actually on 4 different pages because there's so many clubs. But Germany I mean, okay, not in comparison with the States, but in European terms, Germany is a big country.
yep, true.
And very diverse culturally. I mean, the Bavaria is totally different than Schleswig-Holstein. I mean, you could be in a different place in the world.
Indeed,
So
indeed. And
there's
then
big cultural.
I'm part Italian, and I often marvel at how many great jazz festivals the Italians organize every year.
Some great players in from. I mean, Belgium is quite interesting because a lot of people after the war, Italians came here to work in the mines
Hmm.
and the steel industry. So you have in fact, there's villages in parts who speak Italian down on the German border, but you've got quite a number of Italo-Belge musicians who are great players. I mean, we're
Hmm.
talking international level. Great, great players. But Italy produces some really, really good musicians. I mean, really, really good in temperament, I suppose, what it is. But
Well, also
uh,
they're not recognized for their involvement in producing New Orleans culture. New Orleans had a huge influx of Italian, mostly Sicilians, at the late 19th century, early 20th century, uh,
yeah,
and they brought a lot of. I think those, the uniforms that the marching bands wear in
yeah.
New Orleans, some of them the old school marching
Yeah.
bands. Those look exactly like the uniforms they wore in Sicily as well. And because the Sicilians were so put down, they were not considered white, you know, and
No.
they did not understand the racial biases and prejudices. So they opened their stores and their lives to to Black Americans who lived in New Orleans. In fact, there's a group called the Mardi Gras Indians. Does that ring a bell? Well, they celebrate Mardi Gras, of course, but the other day they celebrate big time is St. Joseph's Day, which is a
Oh,
very heavily Sicilian respected saint. So
mhm.
there's, unfortunately, the history's been muddled and erased, no, ignored. But I think the Italians injected quite a bit of energy into the New Orleans culture as well. And of course, all our language terms that we use for music, pianissimo and forte, and it's
Well,
all
of course.
ultimately
Yeah,
Italian.
yeah. I mean, on last Tuesday, I played with, who I know very well. I played with a young guy who's a student here, who in fact was born in Sicily.
Oh, okay.
Joseph, yeah. Yeah, a good player, very, very good player. Yeah. And he goes back, in fact, I think he's going back this week to Sicily, which sadly I've never been to. But there's a really big Italian influence in Belgium, particularly in Liège, uh, places where industry has declined or, I mean, disappeared. I mean, they tend to be concentrated in those areas, but they produce some really very, very, very good musicians over the years. But yeah, it's great. It's quite interesting. I mean, actually, to the kind of continuity of interest in music. In fact, my youngest granddaughter, in fact, became virtually a virtuoso violin player,
Oh,
but then decided she wanted to change careers completely because my son is in fact quite a well-known international illustrator,
oh,
uh, and she's changed to art and actually is now studying at the Art Academy, but also doing a lot of stuff with software and animation and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I envy them both. I have two granddaughters. Between them, they probably have 6, 7 languages.
wow. And
You
and
know,
they're in Belgium.
but
They were raised in Belgium.
no, no, they live in Zagreb. My
Oh,
my son lives in Zagreb, Croatia.
oh, Croatia. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a whole
My
nother
daughter,
world of amazing
my,
people in Eastern Europe.
my daughter-in-law is a scientist, but yeah, that my son, in fact, lives. They live. In fact, their first language is Croatian. But I
Hmm,
mean, they were speaking English before they were 2 or 3 years old.
wow.
I mean, in Belgium, because a lot of part of Belgium, you can't survive unless you speak French and Flemish.
Sure.
So many, many people here.
Isn't there a
I
third,
can.
isn't there a fourth language? I mean, a third language?
Oh, German, yeah.
No, but isn't there even another like sub language that's
Oh, no, no. There's Flemish. There's three official languages.
okay.
There's Flemish, which is essentially Dutch.
Okay.
Flemish, French, and a small enclave down the German border where they speak German. They're the three official languages. Uh, and I can tell you, I can probably go out of here and ask the guy who's sweeping the streets in English, and he will be able to understand and reply.
Amazing.
Went to the recycling uh, just to get rid of some junk the other day. I spreek Engels, telling me I speak English. No problem. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, once you've knocked off two languages, I
Right.
think it's you have the confidence to learn others, and I mean, the eldest granddaughter, in fact, is just moving to do her master's degree in Groningen, in the Netherlands. And she already speaks perfect German, so she'll no doubt learn Dutch very rapidly because Dutch is Low German, really.
Hmm.
Uh, so I mean, she's now into what? 5 languages?
Yeah, it's not unlike music. I can't think of the fellow's name, but he's a very famous bass player. Wooten, electronic bass. Anyway, he needed a gig, and his band dissolved, and there was a opening for a bluegrass bass player. So bluegrass, right? So he spent a weekend learning the top three bluegrass tunes, and he got the gig, and then ended up spending years playing it, and he's known as a jazz person. But yeah, once you learn one language well, and then you learn that second one, and you realize, oh, there's sort of structures that are
Yeah,
similar to each,
it's
then
the
that sort of
confidence.
opens the door to every possible language.
Yeah.
Um,
And that really, if we get back to where we were originally, this, of course, is the thing that's missing in current jazz education. The
Indeed.
average guy at the conservatory could not sit in with a Dixieland band because A, you have to listen to what the other people are doing, which most of them never do, uh, and become a band rather than thinking of yourself as a potential superstar, which so I think a bit of an object lesson, really.
There was something else too that you mentioned earlier about how many members of your family sang, some of them professionally. And that seems to really be the root of all music culture. I'm big. I love to tell the story of how Louis Armstrong considered himself always a singer first who played the horn. And he
Yeah,
was,
very likely. Yeah,
and as a
but very,
child, his first,
yeah,
you know, his first band was what he called a boy group, and
yeah,
with four parts, and they would go on the street corners and sing and make money. And he was taught sight singing in the public schools of New Orleans as a disenfranchised to, was not a pleasant place to be black. And yet
yeah.
the education was good, and they had sight singing every day for a half
Wow.
hour. I have the book that they used in the school.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
American musicians tend are not they're not ashamed to call themselves as being part of the entertainment business.
oh yeah.
Yeah, that isn't the same in Europe.
Mm, mm. But I'm
European musicians tend to regard themselves as artistes
right,
first.
right.
It's very different.
And if you ever visit New Orleans, I don't know if you ever had the occasion to go down to there.
No, I haven't. The only time I ever was going to go there, my brother was there for a couple of weeks, and in fact, going as an individual, it was quite expensive for traveling on your own. If you're with somebody, it's much cheaper. And in the end, I didn't go, which was quite fortunate because it never stopped raining for the 2 weeks he
No,
was there.
it can
But
happen.
I'd
But in
certainly
that
love
in,
to
in
go
that
there.
city, they all consider themselves entertainers. It doesn't matter how great they are as musicians, and they are. They know that
Yeah.
their job is to entertain, and they're not embarrassed about it at all.
Yeah, but a lot of it, not all, but a very large percentage of musicians, jazz musicians in the European context regard themselves as being artistes first.
I
Uh,
call it chamber jazz, and there's a place for it, But
oh,
if
oh,
if you want a big audience, maybe you need to engage with the crowd a little bit more.
I get quite irritated sometimes, particularly at jam sessions, when they end up with these discussions with their backs to the audience. And I say, guys, there are people sitting there.
Right.
They didn't come to look at your backs and listen to a mumbled conversation about what tune will play.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to teach audience awareness at all.
At all. At all.
At
And you know
all.
what? Every young musician should spend time, a month at least, jazz musician in New Orleans, and see how it's handled. And that will be a PhD for them because it really is profoundly different. There's no such thing as that. You're always engaging with the audience, playing great
Yeah.
music, being dignified. It's not a matter of losing your dignity, but it's audience awareness. There's people out there
Well,
that
of
came
course.
to hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I know. I remember seeing Miles actually on the famous European tour,
Uh-huh.
1961, I suppose it was. I can't remember. But I mean, Miles, even his turning his back on the audience, in fact, in a way, was actually attracted more attention than if he'd actually faced the audience.
Right.
Uh, I don't know whether he did it deliberately with his all kinds of things, but yeah, I mean, yeah, the trouble is now that, we have great players, but we don't have the kind of players with that kind of mythology. I mean, you could put these people on a North Sea Jazz Festival, for instance. You were spoiled for choice. You were running around like a maniac to see. Now you've got great players, but that ambience, it's gone.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, Tom Jones is actually featured at the North Sea Jazz Festival. I'm not, you know, I know nothing against Tom Jones, but what he's doing at North Sea Jazz Festival remains to be seen, you know.
Yeah, all the
Uh,
festivals are doing that. Most of them are now.
oh yeah, I mean, it's a pity, you know. I mean, there's some very, 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 very good players around, but the kind of attraction that people like Dizzy and you know Jazz at the Philharmonic and all these kind of things. I mean, I don't know. The audience, potential audience, has changed too. You know, it's a different one. But you know, it sounds a bit of a homily, but I think one of the strengths actually of jazz is its actual fragility.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Right.
You
We
know,
know we know how tentative it is, so we
it
take
sounds paradoxical, but
yeah.
it's true actually. Its fragility is actually one of its strengths.
Yeah.
It'll
Um,
continue regardless of what anybody says. There's an inherent strength internationally, you know, which I know at first hand because you know, I know the international jazz scene, and I play with quite often with a trumpet player as a student here who speaks perfect French, believe it or not, from Tokyo. Oh, potentially great player,
hmm.
great trumpet player,
You know,
beautiful player.
a bass player, and I'm so sorry I can't remember his name. Older fellow, been around a long time, and he might even be past now. And he said, "Oh, jazz will never die. As long as," he said, "it's just like chess. There are always people that are going to love to play chess. They love the complexity of it, the challenge of it. There'll always be people, a small number, but there'll always be people who love that challenge of, you know, learning how to play the changes and, you know, it
Well, yeah, it's an interesting world really, jazz-wise at the moment, and I mean, there's never been so many people in jazz education in the world historically. I mean, there's tens of thousands internationally, but I don't, the trouble is the younger guys and girls, in fact, they tend to be very influenced by pop culture, so everybody wants to play a heroic solo, you know.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Uh, and the concept of being part of a band is kind of set aside to some extent. They don't even listen to each other. Somebody will
Oh,
play a solo and then they'll go and sit down.
yeah. Well, hopefully between your uh, website and videos that are
Yeah,
available,
yeah, yeah.
people.
Excuse me for rattling on quite so long, but you know, it is a favorite subject. You
No,
know?
it's important because the music's, you know, we don't have to do that much. If for instance, if every jazz program, education program included at least 1 hour of watching, you know, Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, you just have to watch. You have to know
It
who these
doesn't
people.
happen. It doesn't happen. My friend Sebastian, who won, say, the Thelonious Monk Prize and the uh, Buddy Rich Prize. Berkeley New End College. We talk about this endlessly. I mean, what he doesn't know about jazz is not worth knowing, quite frankly. And we have these conversations and I get a real insight because he teaches at one jazz college and the other one, which I say is rather different. Uh, but they don't even call them students anymore. They call them customers.
Oh, that's a slippery slope.
Well, yeah, I never realized you could go to Berkeley and buy yourself a saxophone as long as you give them $50,000. Hi, you know,
I've heard
uh,
about that. Yeah, I've heard about that.
uh, and now particularly in England in the university education, you know, we're talking minimum fees of probably nearly £10,000, which is probably what, 12,
Yeah.
$13,000 a year.
And that would be a bargain in the United States.
Well, yeah, but in European terms, you know, somebody living in Belgium can go to it's probably from what, less than €2,000.
To a conservatory.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Well, Peter, this has
So,
been great. I'm so glad we got together, and everybody should check out jazz-club jazzclubs-worldwide. There's a lot of free material. And then if you're in the business and you want some really
Yeah, and
valuable...
there's a WhatsApp thing on there. So if they ever want to WhatsApp me, I'll try and answer questions, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I'm not, there are social media links on there as well, like sort of Facebook and TikTok and et cetera, et cetera. But the main one is the Jazz Clubs Worldwide site. Yeah, so there we are. Anyways, thank you very much for your time. It's been, and I say I hope I haven't rattled on too long.
Oh, not at all. I love talking about the music.
Oh yeah, it's my Irish origins.
Oh, okay.
We tend to have the gift of the gab, as
Well,
they
that's
say,
that's a whole nother topic. The Irish influence on the North, and that's where you have the Irish and the Italian, and between those two, there's a lot of music going on.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, nice to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, great, Peter. See you later.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, please share it. That's how we grow. And remember to subscribe to JazzOnTheTube.com, the internet's largest collection of free, streamable, classic jazz videos.